I don't think I've picked up and read a book for pleasure since like early middle school. I don't even think I read any of my reading assignments for high school. I think I just like skimmed through most of it. Even college, I was just like a huge skimmer. Doesn't mean I don't like reading. It just means that I have a short attention span and I'd rather listen to an audiobook or a podcast or watch a movie than read a book. I used to be able to read like 2 or 3 books in a month. I think that's because I was more encouraged in my high school English classes to read. One day a week, we would always have like a free reading day where the teacher just wouldn't like teach anything for the day and she'd have us read a book instead. And I think that was just because she didn't know what to do for the lesson for the day, maybe? I don't know, maybe she just wanted to keep us distracted for a day. And I usually had like 2 or 3 study hall periods a day too. In those we were encouraged to like do homework for other classes, but I usually did my homework the night before. So instead I was more often like reading just to make time pass. Deep down, I know it was like kind of helpful to be reading because it would really help me to read faster and think creatively. But at the same time, like, do they even do that anymore? I haven't been to a school in God knows how long. So like, are there kids that read in their free time anymore? Or has it been completely forgotten with the rise of like technology and stuff like that? Like, are people just in study halls sitting on their cell phones? Are they like playing Uno with everybody or something? I don't even know anymore. I was lucky that in my time as an active reader, this was the big surge of like young adult novels that were coming out. The late 2000s and early 10s saw a boom in popularity for the release of young adult novels, usually based on a dystopian society different from ours, where there's one chosen one type character that usually has to topple a government or bigger power in order to bring back the world to a happily ever after type deal. I think the style of book really kicked off right after Harry Potter finished his book run with the Deathly Hallows. Most of these books also followed the trend of Harry Potter and had a bunch of movies come out based on the books. I don't think it was really the best idea to support these films in order so we could have more support for original IPs and movies that didn't come from a book that was already created, but that's a topic for a different time. I don't think we need to get into that. But I think it's important to go over a handful of examples to show the meteoric rise of the young adult novel film adaptations and the Icarus-like fall they managed to go through only a few years later. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on Harry Potter because I never read the books. I thought they looked like they were a little too big for my young stupid mind. But like, I think it's important to relive what really started it all. I think I watched like 1 or 2 of the movies throughout my life until my freshman year of college. During Thanksgiving break, I bought the entire 8 movie pack and binged it in a weekend. I'll admit they're pretty decent movies, but I don't think they really find their stride until the 3rd movie, Prisoner of Azkaban, which was directed by the same guy who did Roma and Pan's Labyrinth, which, like, looking at the style of it now, like, how could it have been directed by anybody else? As everyone probably knows, but I'll bring up for continuity's sake, the Harry Potter franchise follows the exploits of the titular orphan and his dealings with the wizarding world. There's magic and potions and familiars and racism and friendship.
No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood.
There's also a through line of all the books about Harry coming to terms with the fact that he's the chosen one and must stop this ultimate evil from killing everyone and taking over the world. Your total baseline stuff. Now, the details in the world of Harry Potter are really fascinating, as there's so much stuff that's like talked about just enough where it creates interest, but not enough where they actually give you any answers. However, with the recent news and comments made by J.K. Rowling, the author of the franchise, I think it's safe to say that we should revisit some of these books and movies and realize that there were probably some underlying opinions that could completely change the way we analyze the text of the movies and books. I also bring up good old HP as a starting point because I think this is where it all began for adaptations. I'm sure eventually something else would have kicked off as the first real young adult novel and the first adaptation to film, but since Harry Potter did it first, it's kind of like the grandfather of the genre. The first 2 Harry Potter films are still good, but any problems that came with them were resolved, and there's now a baseline of tone, production costs, and any other little kinks in the system that could be adapted with other books into their film counterparts. With Harry Potter in the bag, I'm sure there were some other authors that had their own ideas of huge worlds to build and lore to start, and now they had almost like a recipe book to teach them how to do it, how to craft it, and what cliches to have, and which ones are important to an audience of adoring teenagers. I think the first breakout star came in 2008, 1 year after the initial release of The Deathly Hallows. Suzanne Collins released the first book in the Hunger Games trilogy in September of 2008, but I don't think I picked it up until a few years after that. When I finally did start my I need to waste time in school with reading other books phase in middle school, I was treated to a dystopian world of the United States being separated into 12 districts, each one of which would have to send one male and one female citizen into a competition that served as a fight to the death. And the winner of the competition would be praised as a hero and not have to compete anymore. Competition served as a way to punish citizens for a past failed rebellion from 75 years ago that left one district entirely destroyed. Throughout the series, we follow Katniss Everdeen, who eventually starts and leads a successful rebellion against the oppressive government that started the Hunger Games. A battle royale style movie that works as a fight to the death. I wonder where they got that idea. This was one of the first free time books that I read that really interested me and kept me engaged. So when I heard in 2012 that they were going to release a movie based on the book, my little 14-year-old self was hyped. I talked to a group of my best friends at the time and managed to find a way to get us all to go to the Friday night midnight premiere at my local movie theater. A little bit of a side note, I kind of miss those kind of deals. Like, I understand why they moved them, because like it was usually young teenagers working these, and they would get trampled at midnight on a Friday. Like they'd get trampled on a Friday night, but it was Friday at midnight, so it was technically Thursday. So some of these kids would have to work the Thursday night shift and then have to go to school Friday the next morning at like 6 a.m. So like they probably at max, if they fell asleep at the movie theater, would get like 4 hours of sleep. So I understand why they moved it to Thursday at 8, but I still kind of miss going to the movie theater and not having to deal with other people that much, because I would always go so late with my friends. With everything that's going on right now, I also just kind of miss movie theaters. Anyways, I went to this movie screening with 5 of my best friends and all of our girlfriends at the time, so we ended up filling an entire row of theater seats with all 12 of us on a separate date from the rest of the group. I actually really enjoyed the movie. From what I remember, it stayed really close to what they talked about in the book and how the characters were described and stuff like that. It was really kind of fun. I don't think I went to the premieres of the other movies, but I did see them in theaters and I thought they were decent. Maybe I should rewatch them, because I actually don't remember anything from the movies. One trend that I both liked and didn't like that Harry Potter started was the 2-part finale. The last book in whatever franchise the movies were talking about, they would always have a 2-parter for the last book, just because I'm sure they did it just because it would make more money. But my little middle school brain at the time was like, oh, with 2 movies they'll have more time to go over like what they couldn't in the first movies. Like they'll be able to translate the whole book into it. But I think it ends up being just a lot of filler. Like one thing that I think is kind of bullshit with the 2-part finale is that like kind of just felt like the Hunger Games was copying Harry Potter, and even Twilight at the time had a 2-part finale. I understand wanting to fit so much of the book into 2 movies just to make sure that you can get everything done, but it just felt kind of weird that they announced that they were going to do a 2-part movie in 2014, I think, and then The Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out in 2011, and then Breaking Dawn Part 2 came out in 2012. Just feels like they were filling a mold that was set by the movies before it. As much as I love getting as much as you can out of a book series, like, I just think it felt like it was a little bit cheap. The Hunger Games movies all did really well in the box office and critically, so I think people regard it as one of the finer moments in the novel to film adaptation. There were adaptations that came before and after, like a series of unfortunate events in Twilight, but there's one franchise in particular that marked kind of the end of an era for the young adult novel film adaptation genre. I need to come up with a better term for that, because that's kind of long. Where The Hunger Games and some other books I read usually came as recommendations from teachers or fellow students, Divergent was the first franchise I picked up on my own. The world kind of borrows a bit of everything from the novels that came before it. The book follows Beatrice Triss Pryor in a post-apocalyptic Chicago, where the entire city is split up into 5 factions based on personality type. High school students are eventually tasked with taking a personality test that, once complete, will tell if they still belong in the faction that they were born and raised in, or if they have to pack up all of their things and leave their family and friends to move to this new faction. When Triss takes the test, she finds out that she is divergent, meaning she falls into more than one category, and anyone divergent gets killed by the government because that shows free will, and free will, of course, as we know from these kind of books, is bad. The test taker gives her a fake score and tells her to leave to the Dauntless faction to hide and never tell anyone her divergence. Hijinks ensue, and Triss, again, leads a revolution to topple the government who wants to take away free will. I read the entire series and loved it. I really enjoyed the idea of government taking free will and starting a revolution to get that free will back. I found out there was a movie in development for it and went to see it. It was fine, though it had some killer casting choices. Shailene Woodley as Triss, Miles Teller, Zoe Kravitz, Ansel Elgort pre-Fault in Our Stars, Kate Winslet. I think my book nerd glasses were a bit too tight because even though I really enjoyed it at the time, it didn't do too hot. Like, it made enough money to be considered a profit, but it wasn't received too well critically. A lot of critics claim that it just didn't bring a whole lot to the table. The scenery was kind of boring, the plot in general was kind of generic. The series went on to plan out 3 more movies, with the final book being split into 2 parts. Sound familiar? A lot of people did that. Insurgent, the sequel film, came out only a year after the first film, and that got even worse reviews than the first movie. Allegiant was supposed to be split into 2 different movies, but after the first film came out, so many behind-the-scenes things went down that the second part went from a theatrical release to being a television exclusive, to the cast, crew, and executives not being interested in making it at all. The project was scrapped entirely, and to be honest, I went to see the 3rd movie in theaters, and I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened. I don't even remember if I went to see it. Did I even see it? I don't think I saw it. Maybe it was a fine enough ending in itself, maybe it wasn't, I couldn't tell you. If even the people making the movie are bored of it, it's time to put it to rest. I think that there are a number of reasons why we haven't seen any more young adult novel film adaptations in a while. First off, I can't remember the last time a book in that style came out. If there's no new books, there can't be any more movies. Maybe I'm not in touch with it anymore, since I don't actively look for these kinds of things, but I think there has only been a handful that have come out. Most of the releases I see are just expansions of past universes, like for the Divergent collection, which is just a bunch of short stories in the Divergent universe, or the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes from the Hunger Games universe, or that Harry Potter playbook that came out a couple years ago. I'm not sure if there's a market for it anymore. We're currently living in what could be the downtrend of comic book movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which really served as a zeitgeist for the 2010s as one of the most important franchises in movie theaters, and a complete shift in what has been seen as popular. People used to make fun of people that liked comic books and had Spider-Man tattoos or whatever, but now it's unpopular to make fun of people who like that kind of thing. I loved the phase of going into a movie theater to watch a movie based on a book I read when I was still going through puberty, but I don't think the dystopian YA novels really follow that anymore. It just transferred over to comic book movies. Video. I might make a follow-up to talk about some of the other books that I read that got transferred to movies. I didn't want to stick all of them into this one video in case I wanted to make a follow-up, and I also kind of wanted to focus on just the rise and fall and things best happen in threes, so I just stuck to the most important ones that I thought were important to the genre as a whole. Let me know if you have any ideas for any videos in the future. You can let me know in the comments down below. You could follow me on Twitter and let me know there. Follow me on Twitch, check out my website. I'm going to link everything down below. Anyways, that's going to do it for me on this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.